Hi, welcome to this webcast brought to you by Field Service News and in partnership with Cognito IQ. My name is Chris Oldland, I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Field Service News, and I'll be your host and moderator for today as we tackle the question, is data the fundamental building blocks of service excellence as we move into the 21st century? I'm very, very pleased to be joined by three excellent guests today. I've got David Behensky, CTO from Cognito IQ, Dave Webb, COO from Cognito IQ, and Jed Cranny, Head of Direct Field Service for Konica Minolta, all taking part in various sessions. And then at the end of this webcast, we're going to bring everyone together for a panel discussion as well. Dave Webb is going to be looking at some of the key challenges, some of the key pain points that he's seeing amongst field service organisations that he's in touch with in his role as Chief Operating Officer of Cognito IQ, and then also looking at how we can work the opportunities alongside those challenges, because with every challenge, of course, great opportunity arises. Myself and Jed are going to look at the utilisation that Jed and Konica Minolta have of data analytics. We'll be looking at some of the key screens that Jed looks across every day in his role as Head of Direct Field Service and how those are being utilised right across the organisation. But first of all, let me introduce David Behensky. And David is going to be talking about some of the technologies that are coming to the fore at the moment and how field service organisations can harness those. David, over to yourself.
Thanks, Chris. The rate of change in technology continues to accelerate and is showing no sign of stopping. Now, whereas 10 years ago, it was still broadly the case that the technology you used at work was superior to that which you might have had at home, the arrival of smartphones and the app stores supporting those devices has fundamentally flipped that relationship, with most of us, and especially now the digital native millennial cohort, feeling like the tools that they're given to use at work are pretty much from the dark ages in comparison to the phones, tablets, and wearables they're used to at home. The abundance of end-user mobile devices has created a paradigm shift in user expectations for any company providing service into people's homes or businesses. Customers now assume that within seconds they should be able to request whatever they want, be it a service or a product, and track it en route to them instantly through their handheld devices. Being told these days by a provider that someone may arrive between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. and, by the way, could you please make sure someone would be around to let them in, is no longer even close to being an acceptable level of service. Now, much of this change in expectations has been driven by the disruptor companies. People like Uber, Deliveroo, and Amazon have been changing the game in their respective industries. Amazon, for example, have recently announced the ability to deliver packages directly and securely into the boot of your car without you being there. The reason these internet-age companies have been able to fuel and satisfy this shift in expectation is in part down to their ability to leverage cloud technologies. And in the case of Amazon, of course, to pioneer the advances in those technologies themselves. Whereas 5 years ago, there was still genuine debate about whether cloud would ever become a truly viable option for companies worried then principally about the reliability and the security of their data. This argument is now well and truly settled in favour of cloud. Even the most risk-conscious sectors, such as banking and finance, are seeing cloud-native disruptors enter their market, with the fintech sector thriving with players like Monzo and Starling, making the established banks sit up and take note. In fact, with the more stringent GDPR regulations coming into force concerning people's personal information, those companies that chose to move early into the cloud are now finding the compliance requirements that much simpler to implement than organisations that are still having to manage their own data centres and infrastructure. Now, having taken the leap into the cloud, those companies that are willing to continue their investment in cloud expertise now have access to world-class data analytics, machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies to further drive home their advantage. But it's not all doom and gloom for the established field service companies out there trying to keep up with the technological changes and ever-increasing challenges faced from disruptors. Let's not forget that these companies have shown before that they can be at the bleeding edge of technology adoption. After all, field service companies were putting mobile devices into the hands of their engineers and receiving real-time data live from the field, long before Steve Jobs and Apple put the internet into everyone's hands. I believe there are emergent technological trends that will allow such companies to do so again and remain competitive and relevant in a digitally ubiquitous world. Because as well as providing exceptional user experience through their cloud-based apps, the companies that are succeeding know how to use the data that is collected by these applications to close the feedback loop and use that data to drive further improvements into their business. Now, of course, GDPR has been introduced in part to check the power of these companies doing exactly that, and to ensure that their users are given proper visibility, consent, and control over their personal data, which is perfectly right. But again, I believe this actually presents an opportunity for the more established SME companies to win one back over the startups. SMEs are likely to be better placed to comply with the incoming GDPR requirements, having more likely already got ISO certified and being used to operate more effectively within regulated and controlled markets. So the learning curve for such companies adapting to the GDPR regulations is therefore less challenging than for those smaller organisations grappling with these things for the first time. There are also a few key areas of technology where I can see innovative field service organisations being able to capitalise in order to deliver the next wave of innovation into our sector. The first of these is making sense of the explosion of data now made readily available as more and more devices become internet enabled. The hype around Internet of Things has, in my view, yet to really be justified. But once you are in a position as an organisation to harvest data from your machinery directly into the cloud, and then apply machine learning and artificial intelligence capabilities on top of that data, you can start to gain real, actionable insights into the fundamentals of your business that can allow you to gain significant advantages over your competition. Having gained such insights from the data, the final part of the puzzle is in how to best close the feedback loop and leverage those insights back into the field in real time. We are seeing companies increasingly looking into how they move past the handheld mobile app towards more advanced user interface solutions. For example, recent developments in voice technology now mean an engineer can talk directly into their device instead of having to stop what they're doing and type into a tablet. Augmented reality devices such as Google Glass, which was shunned by the consumer market, but is experiencing something of a renaissance in certain workplace settings, are now capable of surveying the area and, for example, alerting engineers to impending health and safety risks, or perhaps overlaying schematics and troubleshooting diagnostics for the systems that they're working on. This can deliver benefits in terms of reduced time required to train engineers on new skills and machinery, and help resolve issues more quickly that might previously have required a phone conversation with someone else in the firm maybe who'd seen that kind of problem before. So, in summary, combining new types of user interfaces, voice, gesture, and AI, together with real-time streaming IoT data and intelligent learning algorithms, all running in the cloud, can unlock tremendous efficiencies for field service organisations and help them deliver the next level of service to their customers.
Okay, and now I'm going to be talking to Jed Cranny. Jed is head of direct field service with Konica Minolta, and we're going to be looking at how he's utilising data analytics and the Cognito IQ tools. Jed, really good to speak to you.
Nice to meet you, Chris.
Pleasure. And perhaps the obvious starting point for this is perhaps if you put the context behind the conversation. So tell us a little bit about Konica Minolta. Tell us about the size of your workforce, what regions you're working in, the biggest headaches you have, and then tell us a little bit about how you've been working with Cognito IQ as well.
Okay. Konica Minolta is a manufacturer of, in my part of the business, of printers. We are moving to being a document solutions company, so document management, document solutions, with the printer at the start and the finish of that if needed, so also the input. So big changes on the way. We're in just about every country in the world, either with a partner or with direct. Across Europe, we direct, and I look after BGB, which is Great Britain, so Business Group Great Britain. I have 285 engineers at this present moment in time, split into production print and office. Majority of my machines are in office. I've got 85,000 products out within the customers at this present moment in time. And as you can tell by the low numbers of engineers I've got, they're very, very reliable. we work on capacity planning and we work on numbers of calls per year. So analytics is really, really important to me. We break it down in 5 regions, and I've got 13 offices within them regions with local management to look after the customers, and if we need to react and go and see customers, we can. We do constant reviews with our customers to make sure the service we're providing is really well. We've got a new thing in the world, which is the CX manager. So they came 2 years ago, and so they look at all the data as well, and they work with me to make sure that the customer experience matches what we're selling and exceeds that.
Yeah. Just one moment before we kind of dig into some of the I know you're going to be showing us some of the screens that you kind of guys use, your CX manager I'm sure uses, but also your service managers. How many managers across those? Is it one manager per region? So there's 13 service managers.
One manager per branch.
Per branch.
So there's 13 what we call branch service managers.
Yeah.
And there's 5 regional managers. So what we do with the regional managers, they're doing projects for Konica Minolta, and also then running the region, make sure we've got a constant from Aberdeen to Exeter, the same service levels provided and managed. And this is what, working with Cognito, we've been able to do with the analytics from my desk. Even if I'm not in the office, if I'm travelling, I can be anywhere in Europe and look into the system and see if we're having a good day or a bad day. And if we need to make adjustments, we're making adjustments in advance, which is very different to how we used to work with our old ERP system. I think most service managers recognise the word, you get the report the day after, you start making decisions from Monday's data on Tuesday about what you need to do to be able to react maybe Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday.
Yeah.
We're able to do that on Monday morning, look at the data, see what's happening, and be able to start moving people. So again, we tried it a few weeks ago. We moved people in Aberdeen 40 miles south to move the engineers in Edinburgh 40 miles south to move the people in the north of Newcastle 40 miles south, and we got all the way down to Bristol.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So it was a plan from the service desk.
Yeah.
So it's utilising the information we've got, the managers all working together, but the service desk taking the key part in that, but utilising the two.
Okay, well, let's have a look at some of these, some of the regular screens that you would be looking at on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
Just to kind of put a point on that. I know when we were talking a little bit earlier, you mentioned now we're going to be looking at a desktop version. Yeah. You mentioned that you could be looking at this on your tablet or
on
your
a telephone.
Is it the same? Are the screens we're going to see now, which are the desktop versions? Yep. You can access the same data.
Absolutely, absolutely everything. As I said to you. As sad as I am on holiday, I go and look at these things. So it means that my MD can look at it. One of the things I wanted was a visible world.
Yeah.
So, i.e., the dark art of service, our managing directors don't get, our financial directors don't get. It's a big cost.
Yeah.
You know, if I look at my department, it's probably the biggest cost in the whole company. So when there's pressures on, they're always going to look that way. So what I learned was if I can make my world visible and make it less of a dark art, they can see it. And working with Cognito, it allows me to do that because my MD can put it on his iPad, he can put it on his TV in his room so he can quickly look up and see if we're getting a good NPS score, if the figures are looking green. And as you can see by looking at the screen behind you, things are in green. Yeah. So straight away that makes everybody calmer. Trust me, when they go red, I'm on the phone, people are on the phone, and sometimes it's just they've gone red for that hour, you know. But everybody's been proactive, not reactive. That helped. And when I saw this, we've worked with Cognito since 2001, 2002, okay, and it was a very mobile data.
Yeah,
sending the document from one to the other. As we grew up as an organisation and removed paper, we realised that we wanted more from the transaction of sending the document there. 7 seconds later, it had been back in our system. We were able to invoice if it was the end of the call. And David came along and then he showed me this data analytics. And I have to be truthful, we stopped in our chairs, we sat back and we realised we were about to make a jump forward. It's made some big changes with our business, which if we get a chance, I'll talk to you about our trainee plan, because we're able to have broad discussions with our engineers. My managers are able to get out, see customers, spend time with customers, because they're not having to sit across the top of the computer, because it's come out, they can look on the mobile phone, they can see if there's an issue. Another manager can see his areas because we're transparent. So everybody's there helping, and we've got much more of a community helping each other than individual regions or individual branches trying just to get the top score. We don't have, I want to be just the top score of a bad team. If I want to be top scorer, I want to be the best of the best.
And it sounds that just from this initial conversation, it seems that the word you said was transparent, if I picked it right. It seems that there's a transparency and the ability for the data to flow across the business is what's kind of been able to elevate not just engineer performance, not just manager performance, not just the general KPIs of the service division, but all of these things are kind of playing into each other.
Absolutely. Once you've got transparency, you've got people spending less time trying to make a report look good for themselves and more time trying to make the data that work for your customers. So everybody took a little bit of time, I'll be truthful. Probably I was the best user of this for the first 14 months. And then suddenly people came along. One of the problems at the start was we got the vanilla system. And David convinced me to keep it vanilla, even after the first 6-8 weeks when I was screaming down the phone at him, going, this does not reflect my figures. Your clock is 24 hours, mine starts at 8, finishes at 6. And David said, live with it and see what happens. If we need to change it, we'll change it. And then suddenly I rang him up one night and went, I'm wrong, because I'm sat looking at tomorrow. And David went, what are you looking at? And I said, I'm looking at the last period task. And I said, I'm looking at tomorrow, and I can see I've got 180 calls I've got to get to before 11:30. And I went, which isn't a seriously bad task to do. It's well within our capabilities, but I actually know where every one of them is, and I know how it's going to work. I can see if we're in jeopardy. So we've left it as it is, because it actually, if you think differently with the vanilla tool, but it allows me then to talk to other users of the system, and
there's a shared language, shared experience,
absolutely,
because you're utilising the system in the same way.
Yeah. So one of my recommendations to people is, as much as we want to bespoke everything to our processes, if you buy something that's going to make your business and give you the analytics of your business, is actually sit there and work out what it's doing before you start changing the system. Maybe you need to change your processes because the world's changed around you.
That's a good question. Good point. And a question around that is: do you think that that's part and parcel? Because you mentioned that it's kind of been a long kind of relationship with Cognito, that you've gone through a number of different iterations.
Yes.
That initial conversation, I think you mentioned you moved away. You've gone paperless now. So there are a lot of processes that there'll be a whole bunch of guys that are listening to this that will be in the same situation. Service directors that will have processes that are perhaps no longer required because they're based around old manual workflows, and now you've kind of you've taken them out. So actually, it's worth rethinking those processes.
Absolutely, and we put all of our managers through 3-4 years ago ITIL. And the reason we did that was to get them process orientated. But the second part of it was for us to review all of our processes with a group of people, with the strategy, the plan, the transition, and then the BAU. And how everything links around that. So we have a CAB, which is our main management meeting once every single month. Everybody puts a request for change in if they've got one, and there's reasoning behind it. So you've got that structure behind it to make the changes, but you've also then got the tool to be able to go back and point to what that change will make, and then measure that change as it happens.
Okay, let's have a look at some of these tools then, and let's have a kind of bit of a deep dive into some of this, because I know there are kind of 3 key areas that we've discussed whilst we're kind of discussing the conversation today that would come out from that you've kind of felt that have come out, and that's an enhancement of productivity, enhancement around customer satisfaction, and of course employee engagement, which is something that's really come through. So talk me through the screen that we're seeing now.
Okay, the screen you're seeing now at this moment in time called the Plan Perspective. And what this does is the blue line, which is giving me what the plan is of the visits or the incidents that are in this day, and when I should be closing these visits down. So it looks at the time that the visit was placed. 70% of all my visits are timed, so I've got to do them within a timed SLA. They can be as low as 2 hours.
Right.
Lucky I get 4 hours. So you can imagine, you've got to be thinking all the time. And my service desk's got to be thinking all the time how to do it. I have a service tool that puts a plan together of about 80% of what's happening, and we work with it. The green line tells me how far I'm ahead. So if it's above the blue line, I'm good.
Yeah.
And if you can see on the far side, it's also straight away telling me. So somebody who's not technical, so for my MD, for anybody in the business who walks up, they can quickly see that at this moment in time, we're 133 visits or incidents ahead, closed. We're 60 in the hour, and we've saved 97 hours already this morning. So that could be less travelling time and times on site. So when we get to another sheet, we'll be able to see how many calls incidents we've actually shut down. It should be around about the 300 mark, actually. We shut down 180 tasks. My apologies, okay, this moment in time. The second list down tells me where my peak in the days. So the first one's linear. Mm-hmm. The second one is telling me hour by hour. So that's Mount Everest today to try and get across. I only need to get on average to hit my average response time. In averages it's 60%, with only 5% going over the 8 hours if you've got a 4-hour response time, or 6 hours if you've got 4 hours if you've got a 2-hour response time.
Okay.
So this is telling me that all day I'm ahead.
So that's where the green line's tracking, yeah?
That's where the green line's tracking. So what will happen is this will turn in, it's called the molar, because by the end of the day it looks like your back tooth. So it's got the dip in it and it comes back again. And then what will happen is this will pick up again. So at 7, 8 o'clock it'll be showing me that I've got calls to close. Well, obviously my clock shuts at 6 o'clock. So then I can work back the number of hours between that call coming in and average, and then I can work out for next morning where I need to be on this scale.
And just to confirm, obviously we've anonymised some of the data, and we've made this kind of a so we can make sure we're compliant, etc. But when you're seeing this live, you're seeing that literally in real time. In real time.
Yeah. So what happens is there's in the bottom corner here, I can set this up for being 5 minutes, 1 minute, an hour. Whatever time I want it to do, I can set it for which month I want to look at, which is obviously this month I want to be looking at, and then I can even turn it down into visit types. So we've got visit types in here. So if I was to click on there, you'll see that it's got the different visit types. So that's what we're looking at, is every type of visit today, even the ones that haven't got the response time on them. So we can see everything that's going. But if I just want to look at the response, I would just go down to that one, click on that. So what that does is it gives me the opportunity to see, are we working at the rates we need to do to clear the business and keep our customers happy? My CX manager can look at this as well, which is really handy.
Well, let's use that as a segue to talk about MPS, because I know that that's something that your CX manager is probably going to be quite heavily focused on, because it's the pervasive tool that everybody seems to be utilising in terms of getting that understanding of where the customer base is. In terms
I think MPS is a great tool for the simple reason a lot of our buyers, especially in my industry, don't actually work at the end where the hardware is. So they're not the customer. They might buy 300-400 machines. They're not the actual customer who actually has the experience with my engineers, has the experience with my service desk, has the experience with the machine. So what we do at the end of every single call, we do all the surveys, but at the end of every single call, we ask one simple MPS question. And the simple question is would you recommend Konica Minolta on the grounds of this visit? So that sort of wording. So as you can see by this, my CX manager, my MD, everybody in the company could, that we allowed to look into this. So if we've got it on the screens in head office, we've got 237 visits closed today. 63% of them have given us feedback, and the score is 86. Now you only get a score with a 9 or a 10.
Yes.
8 or a 7 is a neutral score, so you can see that in the grey there. So we've got some neutral scores, and we've actually got 1 negative today. So we would be able to click on that, and the negative would come there.
Yeah.
And then you would be able to click on that and be able to get to that customer. My managers have got an hour to ring that customer. Six or below. And to give you an example, the very first one that came in, somebody had an argument with their partner on the Sunday night. And the first person walking through the door was getting it, and they had to apologise to us. The second call we made from that, the guy clapped his hands and said, I've been trying to contact somebody and I haven't had an answer, but I filled in a silly survey and you're talking to me. I've got a senior manager on the phone, and he bought 2 machines.
Okay,
so it showed us some failings.
Well,
the negative is, I was taught many years ago that Every negative is an opportunity, especially in the UK, because your customers are crying out to you. We don't do it, we walk away. So as you can see, up to now, this month, we've closed just under 3,000 calls. 59% of them have given us feedback, and we've got an 87% score. I can also go back into the days and see if I've got any negatives in them days, which they are. If I've been away on business and I've not been looking at it, I can go back in and I can go back through the days, so I can go historically through it if I want to go through it and get the information. But the really great thing is I have a customer, he's my biggest customer, I go and see them and I put the NPS score. The first time I did it, it was like, oh, well, your SLAs. Well, I can do an SLA for them, which is for a government office, or it could be a charity.
Sure.
And me turning up after 4 hours to a charity that only stays open 2 hours is only going to upset them.
Yeah, of course.
But me turning up on Thursday the week after, as they walk into the charity and fixing the machine or sorting the problem out for them, is going to delight them. So we showed them this, and they've really bought into the idea. Actually, it's about delighting customers, and this gives us that open vision of it. It opens the vision to the business. People can see what we're doing, and we can follow through and see what's happening. So it's a really great tool. It's a super tool.
Yeah, no, it's great, and it's good to see it visually as well, because NPS is something that's massively useful. It's something that an awful lot of companies utilise, but to be able to kind of have that broad, again, it goes back to this transparency, doesn't it? It's being able to have that broad kind of context and be able to. Do your engineers have access to, or if they were sat with their manager, would they be able to kind of go, right, well, and you can drill that down to the engineer level? Or?
You could go down to engineer level, as you saw in the sheet. You can go down to regional level, you can go down to branch level. I tend to look at the UK, and if there's a problem, then I'll start hunting out where the problem is. If you know NPS score, 87 is an unbelievably great score, right? And the reason is because you're at point of sale, I am handing you my tablet or to sign. I can't see what you've done, and if you don't sign, it doesn't work. And we ring tens to thank you, just in case one of my engineers decides he wants to sign somebody's name. And they know we ring tens, so they know we ring randomly just to say thank you for the score. So you get about a 20-point difference. So if you were actually to scale that back into real world, then our customers are basically saying is we're just over 60%.
Okay. So let's drive. I'm just looking at the time, and I know you're going to be joining us for the panel conversation as well later. Mm-hmm. But if we can just maybe drill down into one more of the screens. Now, tell me about the screen that you've got here, and we'll kind of dig into this.
Talking about customer engagement, engineer engagement. One of the benefits that we saw with this system is you have one-to-ones and you have PDRs with your engineers, but it's like Goliath taking on an army. It's one person's got all the data, the other person's done a full day's work, quite tired, come in, sitting down to have a one-to-one with his manager or a PDC with his manager. Yeah. And it's I've seen in the past it's been a negative thing. What you're seeing here is we call it the engineer league. Mm-hmm. So it can go from where I can just look at it for the whole company. So see what the score is and how we're doing on our SLAs and our key SLAs across the branch. And then we can break it down into the quality of work that we're doing, and we can go down into team, then we can go down into individual. So when we get down to the individual, if I'm having a conversation with you and I said to you, what did you do 3 weeks last Tuesday? Well, you've had 3 weekends in between. Well, it's not really fair on you. I'll probably have some spreadsheets and maybe a nice PowerPoint presentation to beat you with, where if I put this on, I can actually show you all your shift, what you did in the shift, where you went on the map, what percentage of time you were productive on customer sites and you were travelling, while you were doing that travelling, where you went, and you score for consistency, productivity, utilisation, effectiveness, and you can see what you're strong at, what you're weak at. Now, you don't just want to look at bad shifts, you want to look at good shifts, and what you want to do is say, Chris, what did you do in that shift? And what was different about that day? Because that's your top scoring day of the quarter or the month that we're reviewing. And then maybe you want to then start looking at the guy's efficiency. So, for instance, in Konica Minolta, we take all the calls that are closed in Germany, France, and ourselves on FTP. We take the average time for them calls, and that gives us an average time by product. So as the call comes to you, Chris, you might get product A, product B, and product C. They're all at different times. So if you're suddenly going 10% faster than everybody else on product A, is there a gain that I can get for 1,000 engineers across the whole of Europe? Or have I got a problem coming with quality in the future?
Yeah, because of course, if you've got an engineer that's maybe cutting corners, then it'll be great for the efficiency and the productivity in the short term, but things like mean time to failure are going to be the headache that's waiting for you maybe 6, 8, 10 months down the line.
Down the line, and that's what we're seeing that we'll be able to pick up well in advance. This also gives my leadership team the confidence to back us on moving away from the usual merry-go-round of just going in, we lose an engineer, we want to replace that engineer, so we go to one of the agencies. The agency sends us what I would class as a photocopier engineer. It's the people that other people don't want, or they've suddenly moved on, but they're basically 20-year-old photocopier engineers. And what we want to do is go and create a training system, a trainee system. So in the last 3 years, we brought 40 trainees into the business. Okay. And they've got a path where they can start at 16, 18 years old. They know the track they're going to do. So for the first 8 months, they can't touch the field. They've got a training package, and they've got to follow that training package. At the end of 8 months, the earliest they can do it is 8 months. The latest they can do is 18 months. It's in the contract at 18 months it stops. So they take an assessment centre, and they get certified as a junior engineer.
Right.
Then they work through the associate path. Then they work through the professional path. When they get to the end of the professional path, what we've done is we've gone out and looked at the whole industry's wages, and we've put slightly more on that. So when they're professional, and our retention rates have gone from where we were losing 15, 20%, depending on where you were in the country, we're down in most of our areas, we're down at 3 and 4%.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And the really great thing is we do have a lot of retirements coming up. My average age in my team is 42 years old, even with the trainees I brought in. My average tenure of my engineers is 17 years.
Okay.
Now we are making inroads into that with the younger ones that are coming into the system, but there's a real energy about them.
Yeah.
And what it's all about is creating a learning program. So the new engineers are going to become more and more multi-product, and I don't just mean on hardware now. I'm talking about switching the brain from software to hardware to purely just looking after customers and talking to customers.
It's a different skill set today, isn't it?
Absolutely. So what we've realised is we've created this learning set, but this has given our leadership team the confidence that they can see the quality that's coming through. They can see the development that's coming through. They can see we're managing it. And again, as everything on this, it's transparent in my world. If my MD wants to go into this, right, even if he hasn't got the skill to go into that page, he's got the skill to pick the phone up to me and say, "Come here, I want to have a look at this, and why is your main score dipped?" Yeah. But it's great. It's transparent. The younger guys, and I would say the majority, I would say your 80-20, they like it. Because they're having grown-up conversations between themselves and a manager, they're not having a manager on an engineer conversation.
Yeah, exactly. No, it makes perfect sense. And again, it seems that the key things, my final takeaway here, is that it's the transparency, that the ability to analyse the data and to do so quickly as well. Let's not forget that this is a hugely powerful system that you're able to pull that data so quickly and move from one screen to the next. But that's what enables, I like the phrase, grown-up conversations, because that seems to be where you've got that fostered culture. Jed, real pleasure speaking to you. I know you're going to join us for a little bit later on with the panel discussion, but we're going to move into the next session. And thanks again for showing us through that.
Cheers, Chris.
Okay, and now our next speaker is going to be Dave Webb, who's COO of Cognito IQ. And Dave's going to be talking to us about some of the challenges that field service organisations are facing today, referencing some of his own customer touchpoints and his experience in the field, and exploring how the technologies that are emerging all around us, pretty much every day it feels, can help companies overcome some of these key challenges. So, Dave, great to speak to you. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Chris. In my experience, most field service organisations are striving to deliver exceptional service, a complex, dynamic endeavour where few things remain constant for long. and decision making needs to adjust constantly to changing conditions. Pressures acting on the operation from within the organisation and externally from customers and the broader market create a constant long-term demand for more efficient and effective service delivery. Whilst even slight changes to operating conditions, the sudden impact of unseasonable weather conditions, the introduction of a new product line or a new customer can have a sudden and significant impact on the dynamics of the operation. Too often, just as service delivery indicators point to success, something changes and operational teams can find themselves facing a wholly new dynamic, often without absolute clarity as to exactly what combination of factors triggered the change, and are therefore left unsure as to how best to respond. With the long-term drive for efficiency and effectiveness stripping most operations of excess capacity, their ability to flex to meet these challenges are significantly constrained. Judging the right levers to pull and just how hard to pull them is something of an art form, a gift, for which managers of field service operations are often noted. Get the reaction to an emerging threat wrong, too great or too little a response, and the complex balance of the operational ecosystem can be thrown out. Recovering that balance and restoring the operation to the conditions necessary for exceptional service often proves a costly and timely affair. In my role, I get the opportunity to work with some exceptional management teams delivering field service across a diverse range of industry sectors and different geographies. When I start talking with new organisations about their field service operations, I'm constantly reminded just how challenging their role can be, as they describe having to make a complex array of day-to-day decisions, often with an imperfect insight to the status of the operational dynamic on which their decisions are based. Most organisations are capturing a broad range of data from across the various dimensions of their field service delivery, from workload planning, resource availability, schedule efficiency, service outcomes, customer satisfaction levels, asset profitability, etc., etc. And most are embarking on initiatives to increase the range of data that they're capturing, for example, with large denormalized data sets offered by the Internet of Things. In spite of the effort organisations place on the importance of data capture, few of the management teams I speak with feel that the data is delivered to them in a form which adequately supports the complex operational decision-making they have to perform on a daily basis. Too often, these management teams talk about expending a large proportion of their available time to gathering and aligning data from disparate sources and then manipulating that data into a form in which it is capable of delivering reliable insight into the performance of the operation. For all the hard work required to create that insight, management teams are left further frustrated as the insights available rarely isolate the root cause behind the dynamics of the latest challenge at hand and truly support the decisions they must make in response. Time lost wrestling with the data leads many to refer to a sense of management in the rearview mirror. Decisions based on out-of-date, expired data sets that leave them with a feeling that they're chasing echoes in the operation. All of that effort expended on getting to the insight also takes its toll on time available to spend at the front lines of the operation with their engineers and out with the customers, adding value. As Dave Behensky has already described, there are trends in current technology which, if harnessed appropriately, I believe can deliver the level of decision support field service teams as a whole require. And when I say as a whole, I mean management, workers, and often integrating the customer too into that picture. It can do so in real time and in ways that can release them to focus on better performing their roles with the benefit of that insight, as opposed to spending their time on data preparation or reacting to performance nudges that echo from events no longer relevant. To be considered truly effective, decision applications for field service need to, one, I believe, provide holistic, real-time insight into those dimensions of performance that influence the overall service delivery, and two, help to guide a proportionate operational response in ways that collectively engage the entire operational team. To be considered holistic, these applications need to draw on large, often disparate data sets from a variety of sources and across a range of different things that make up the ecosystem of a typical field service operation. Valuable insights into the performance of an operation typically lie at the intersections in the relationship between those things or data sets. And traditional technologies have found it difficult to normalize seemingly incompatible forms of data. Deriving value, for example, from the Internet of Things revolution represents the latest and perhaps arguably one of the largest to date of these data challenges. Big data technologies make this traditionally difficult computing challenge increasingly possible, with cloud providers such as Amazon offering unparalleled compute and data storage performance at scale. Applications that are designed to harness this capability are breaking down some of the traditional barriers to visibility within the operation. Applications also need to consider performance trends across those data sets in both long and short time horizons if their decision support is to be considered sufficiently holistic. Technologies such as machine learning and predictive analytics are proving capable of identifying underlying patterns of performance in the field service operation that were simply too complex for traditional applications to identify. This is increasingly true as much larger data sets, such as IoT, have come online in recent years. Combining the deep understanding of long-term performance with the compute power to highlight and match this with exceptions in real time, these applications are capable of providing operational teams with clear direction as to the correct course of action to take to address the specific dynamics of each challenge as it arises. Effective team collaboration is key to delivering exceptional service. Applications centered on a single real-time data set have an opportunity to align teams across the operation around a shared understanding of service delivery performance. Responsive artificial intelligence technologies offer the ability to take feeds from predictive analytics, for example, and combine them with the awareness of real-time exceptions to provide clear and concise decision support within the operation. Beyond simple advice, this technology is making it increasingly possible for applications to automate so-called learned responses to common patterns of exceptions that occur, freeing operational teams to tackle other more valuable activities. To be an effective stimulus for collaboration in the operation, decision support applications need to deliver performance insight in ways suited to the different roles within the operation. For example, engineering, planning teams, scheduling teams, customer service, spares and logistics, account management. One size certainly does not fit all where insight into performance in the operation is concerned. For the engineering teams, for example, this should be increasingly via mobile technologies, which seamlessly link responses to exceptions that arise into the standard flow of their activities. Gone are the constant interruptions for updates or the need to sync with the center, replaced by less intrusive delivery mechanisms that complement, not disrupt, engineering activities by providing key customer-facing resources with greater situational context and awareness around the performance of the operation. This is increasingly made possible as virtual and augmented reality technologies mature and become more prevalent. The traditionally complex and challenging nature of field service operations, when combined with the enhanced capabilities offered by the latest cloud-based technologies, certainly makes it an exciting time to be involved in this industry.
Okay, and now we've brought the guys all back together after 3 excellent sessions there. So just to remind you who we've got on today, we've got David Behensky, CTO of Cognito IQ, and Dave Webb, COO of Cognito IQ, and Jed Cranny, Head of Direct Field Service from Konica Minolta. Gentlemen, thank you very much for 3 really insightful presentations or conversations. I think there was some really interesting flow across the 3 of them and some good synergies there. I was furiously making notes as we kind of were going through the sessions, and just wanted to raise a couple of questions, drill a bit deeper into some of the areas that we tackled and make some of my observations of my own. One thing that really came across to me across the 3 presentations was the power of data and its ability to drive businesses forwards. Jed, you spoke a lot about transparency and how that's brought raise the bar across the various different divisions within Konica Minolta and across different levels that you've been operating in. A question that I'll put across to the three of you, perhaps Jed, will start with yourself. Just how important is it, though, that data can flow from one business silo to another, from one division or one seniority level to another? And I'll just preface that with a second question. Can a business today, bear in mind that our audience will be made up of a lot of service directors and similar roles to yourself, do you think that we've now reached the point that businesses need to make sure that they've broken down those data silos, because otherwise they're simply not going to be competitive anymore? Jed, I'll put that to yourself first and then come to you.
I think transparency of data is important in the service world because we have a dark art, and to the rest of the business, we just look like a huge cost to the business. One of the most important things when we got the data from Cognito in the trial, we were able to show that to our FD and MD, and straight away they could see the value of that data across the business, and it took away the dark art of what we were doing. We've opened it up to anybody who wants to look into the top level figures, so they can't actually see the actual customers, they just see the top level figures within our business. So CX Manager can see NPS score, anybody can see the score we're doing for the day, so are we meeting our SLAs, are we behind on our SLAs, and that openness brings much more informed questions to us, and then that raises the level, as you said, of the engineers and the service management to answer their questions and make sure that we're hitting our SLAs because we're going on well, which does help, and it helps with investments. So for other organisations, I would say, the more open you are, the more chance you've got of getting investment within your business.
It's an interesting point. Dave, to speak on that last phrase that I liked from Jed was an open world.
Yes.
That seems very 21st century. It seems like where a lot of businesses are aiming to be, and it's great that you guys have already made it at Konica. What's your thoughts on that? Is that something that you're seeing become more and more prevalent?
Yeah, I sort of touched on it in my talk, really around needing to harness the field service team as a whole and really encourage collaboration around the data. And I think that is the nature of the world that we're operating in now. Is that it's no longer the preserve of management teams to manage the customer experience, to manage the performance of the business, to worry about dimensions of success for the organisation. It's down to all contributors. The field engineers, they are the people that interact most closely with the customers. The old adage of the trusted advisor is absolutely true today, and being able to share with the engineers the impact that their contribution is having on the overall performance of the operation, to ensure that you've got that openness of communication. What I've seen Konica Minolta and Jed and his team do so effectively is to make that performance discussion about the process in the operation. It's far less about people, far more about their contribution to the process, and identifying those aspects of the process that are failing or could be improved. So openness, transparency, but also the way in which you engage teams in the discussion around that performance is critical. If you use good data badly, then you'll only get to use it once. If you use it well, then the reality is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You get this kind of continuous performance improvement mindset emerging within the teams that makes a huge difference to the overall. It starts to take care of itself.
Which is always a good place.
That's the goal.
Yeah, that's always nice.
And it should free management teams and people like Jed who can offer a huge amount of value in their interactions with new business development, key account management, and those aspects of the role. Frees them up from managing the day-to-day service delivery. They can focus purely on management by exception around the operation, and then really focus on, where's the next business development goal coming from, and how can I contribute? How can I make service come alive for my business development colleagues, for prospects and customers?
Okay.
And that's a good word, management by exception.
Yeah.
Rather than blanket Excel spreadsheet. The information that's put there, especially when we speak about the engineers have put that there. So part of the discussion is this is live data, this is what you put there, this is what the pushing that you did. You've got 7 choices within the workflow. as I said earlier on, in that workflow, it long lasts them at the same time. So if you want to make a choice that I'm not actually at the place where I'm supposed to be, you can make a phone call, be honest to your boss, and to be honest, in our organisation, most times we'll say family first, or you can push the button, and then it's your choice, and it very much becomes your choice, and everybody understands that because it is transparent. You've seen the caterpillar, so you can see each part of the process. And as David says, the more open that is and the more transparent that is within the engineering side, but also outside of that, people can actually see the workflow and then describe that to your customers as well as to the engineers.
Yeah,
it's a great point.
Dave, a quick question just to take this slightly, the point around data to a slightly different angle on this. Because obviously in your role as Chief Technology Officer, you're somebody that I guess lives and breathes in data. One of the challenges that comes up, and we'll probably perhaps touch on this a little bit later as well when we kind of talk about some of the emerging technologies. I mean, we talk about data lakes. I often joke it seems that there's every other type of data topography there's out there. There's mountains, there's lakes, there's probably glaciers somewhere. Whose role is it now to be able to identify what is good data, as Dave spoke to? Is that something that you as a provider should be guiding someone like Jed on, or is that something that an organisation like Konica Minolta needs to turn up at your door and say, this is what we want, how do we do it? How does that kind of role work?
Yeah, great question. I think obviously the answer is probably it depends. And to an extent, both sides can have contributions on that level. It's certainly true that data is the new arms race in businesses. Being able to marshal and gain benefits and insights into that data is really what can drive benefits and drive opportunities for you to beat your competition. So if you can harness that data, then the rewards are out there. I think that comes in then to two sides. You can have some insights yourself, but it also helps to have people from the outside also looking at things that maybe you didn't see about your own data. You can become a bit tunnel visioned on that. So absolutely, I see the role of service providers to help with platforms to bring that data, call them data lakes or whatever you want to call them. There's a lot of organizations that are looking to do that, which is, okay, let's have one place where we can get all of our data and make it easily accessible through APIs and other such interfaces. And then when we've got that means that really, and then I think this leads back to your original question, that flow of data between the different parts is available then. So maybe you have a particular vendor that can access that data and glean some insight you wouldn't have got yourself. It's also available to other areas of your business. And what I find is that when you have that kind of structure in your data, you get emergent things happen that you wouldn't have expected necessarily. Actually, if you get two different people looking at the data, you'll discover something that neither would have done on their own.
I touched there briefly on the amount of data that's coming from the Internet of Things. Across the presentation, we've mentioned a couple of different technologies, augmented reality, got a couple of mentions, I think AI and machine learning probably was in there. Is there one technology for you guys? And again, I'll just put the question out to you and whoever wants to jump in on this. Is there one technology that you think is set to radically change the way that service and field service in particular is delivered, like perhaps mobile did five years ago? Or do you think it's a case that we're in this perfect storm of all these different technologies, cloud, big data, IoT, augmented reality, and so on and so forth? Is it that the savvy business takes a little element from each? I mean, if anyone wants to jump in on that.
Sure. I mean, I think field service operations are complex. Fulfillment spans, a broad gamut of different business functions in reality within a field service operation today. We have got an awful lot of connected machines that form part of the network and the framework in which we're delivering service, providing very rich data sets, but which can be difficult to work with for humans to spot patterns in that data set can be incredibly difficult. So there's no doubt big data technologies, for want of a better term, really do have a part to play, I think, in field service, where you've got so many complex and dynamic actors operating on the operation, then trying to piece together the specific relationships that are going on. They vary operation to operation. So in our experience, we know where to look within organizations and operations that we're working with, but the exact mix of context, the nature of the service being delivered, the customer base, geographies, all of those as a backdrop mean that each operation is a challenge in its own right. Overlaying big data technologies that can look across that data set in a much, much broader sense undoubtedly will have a big part to play. We're finding some fascinating insights into processes that have been traditionally highly automated in field service. So technology providers are very mature in delivering scheduling and planning tools within field service. But by looking at that data through a different lens, using some of these newer technologies, what we're finding is that perhaps those processes have been overly automated before they've been understood. And there is an opportunity there, undoubtedly, for savings in terms of efficiency and effectiveness within the scheduling process, for example. At that point where we're bringing work and resource together that's most critical in the operation for delivering service. There is opportunity in that space, even in that most of all automated of spaces where algorithms have been at play for many, many years. I think for engineering teams, particularly and the guys on the front line, access to information and a consistent access to information that is correct in near real time, does place a large emphasis on mobile and mobile technologies. And I think increasingly in ways that shouldn't disrupt the activities that they're performing. It should really complement and overlay that over their activities in ways that simply weren't possible, even sort of 5 years ago. I think that's where the likes of augmented reality and so on will play a big, big part in the future for field service.
Yeah, with augmented reality, it almost feels like a little bit like where we were with cloud maybe 5 years ago, where we seem to be pushing this open door. It's just waiting. Everybody seems to be waiting for everyone else to go forward.
I think arguably IoT was a little akin to that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that there's certainly a strong case for AR, especially in terms of getting the knowledge and the experience out of the tech. You made an interesting point there. I want to kind of bring this across to yourself, Jack. Dave spoke there about two very distinct sets of the field service operation, i.e. the dispatch and the management of resource and the scheduling engineers, which is obviously very much a back office kind of environment, and then technology that will enable the engineers. When you're approaching looking at various technologies to see which is the next step for Konica Minolta, do you have a strategic view of, right, how do we empower our engineers? How do we empower our dispatchers? Or do you have a more holistic view of what can sit across the various ones? Because there are different, some technologies may sit across both, some may sit very well in one area or the other. So,
well, I was going to answer your first question. It's a little bit like taking a golf bag with the clubs with you. And you've got to use the right tool at the right time. So I think, big data, machine learning has got to be, in a way, our driver. Because that's going to ask, and it already is, even with the low level I'm using it at, creating questions that 20 odd years of knowledge would have asked.
Yes.
And that's like shortening the learning gap for some of my managers. But that's giving us a chance to have debate rather than create information. And then you've got to then start looking at, how you're going to use, for instance, augmented reality. And we're looking at it from the fact that we started looking at it from supporting our engineers. So an engineer's on site, we've got a great skill set back in the office, and the guy gets stuck, and I want to save 3 minutes, because 1 minute in my life lost. So for instance, my 63 minutes going to 64 minutes as an average, that's one engineer lost. Yeah. So if I can bring that 63 minutes to 60 minutes without affecting the quality of the service we provide our customers, because the knowledge is in one place and it can be helped really quickly. So we started with that, and then somebody just looked at it and said, why can't we help customers? And we went, oh, we never thought about that. And then somebody else saying, well, we were telling the people in the service desk and the first line and second line support and service desk went, well, why have we got this?
Yeah.
So the thing about it is, it goes back to that transparency bit, is we all work in little silos and we're doing something in a direction. Well, open it up. So we're using Yammer now to tell people what we're doing, and then suddenly somebody comes along, oh, have you thought about doing this? And it's quite funny. It comes from higher, so from maybe director level, but then it also comes from somebody who's in maybe logistics, not in frontline service. Our customers have changed. We live in a very, very now world. I mean, the other week there was a shooting or an incident in Australia, and at 7:40, I was watching videos of it at 7:45 at night. And that's the now world we live in, and people expect answers. So we've got to move to predictive maintenance.
Yeah.
The only way we're going to do that is with big data, machine learning. And I've set targets for within the next 10 years. If we send an engineer to a call, we fail. And I work in a business where at this moment in time, 14,500 incidents a month, right, is accepted, and it's good for its industry. But I'm saying in 10 years' time, I was not. So
it just goes to show the pace of change.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're living in a completely different world.
You've got to pick the right tools at the right times, and it may be, like I said, it's a golf bag. You've got all of them down, and you teach the skill sets, and you have the right people making the right decisions. But I do think for me the driver is information like I get from the Cognito system. I get that live, working on it. If I'm not in the business, somebody who's one of the regional managers or one of the service managers can make a decision and talk to somebody else within the business, somewhere else, and say, look, I can see you've got a problem, and help each other.
Yeah, so I really like the analogy of the golf bag. I think to answer the original question, yes, I think it is going to be a combination of all of these things that combines. But what I'm hearing from my fellow panelists here as well is that what we're really striving for here is to reduce that feedback loop to become more real time. And we actually need pieces out there in the field, as well as analytics in the cloud, as well as human know-how and machine know-how, all with the goal of trying to improve that feedback loop and get that to as short a possible as time, so that we can be learning organisations and iterate quicker and quicker and quicker. And that's really what we're all striving for. 100%.
To kind of reference that feedback loop as well, and also again to kind of talk across something that was mentioned across a number of the conversations earlier on, presentations, and also Jen, I know you mentioned you've recently introduced a CX role in the last couple of years.
Absolutely, yes.
Where does the customer sit in that feedback loop? And I'll put it straight back to you. Where does the customer sit in that, and how important is it that they're embedded in our thinking when we're designing these processes, when we're thinking actually, right, we need X, Y, Z data sources, we need to be utilising AR, or we need to be utilising Internet of Things capabilities, connected assets. Where should we put them? Should we kind of put them at the centre and build out, or should we understand the processes and then see how best to fit them?
So I'm a firm believer in user-based design. So absolutely put the user of the system at the centre. Whether the user is the end user, or whether the user, to what Jed was talking about there, it's going to be failure if you've sent an engineer to it. So the end user perspective changes somewhat there, but really understanding, what it is that you're optimizing for and who your end user is, and then designing around that use case is absolutely essential. The last thing you want to do is design something in isolation, wait for feedback, and then realize that, your user actually has changed, and actually the whole thing you were building for is no longer there, and the industry's changed underneath your feet. So,
which is happening rapidly. We're on shifting sands with the rate of technology, and also the more empowered customer that we have. Jen, maybe you can speak to that. It seems that the customers today, whether it be in a business-to-business environment or business-to-consumer environment, of course, I'm guessing you guys sit across a number of different industry verticals, so probably have quite an interesting perspective on this. But it seems that the bar on customer expectations is rising rapidly. Is the solution to that, and are we going back to the data again? Is it making sure you have that firm understanding of what their needs are and their aims, and also so you can exceed those rather than just meet their expectations?
I think going back to heads of terms, where you sit in a meeting with a customer and all you're talking about is heads of terms, you've got a broken relationship. Yeah. I think one of the big things that we've learned since we got the Cognito system, the data it brings to me, one of my biggest customers just never ever sees the end product. So they've got thousands and thousands of units bought. It's on a framework, but I go visit them on a quarterly basis. They've wrote SLAs for government offices or even a charity. And as I said earlier on, they're very different customer experiences at the end. What NPS has allowed me to do is actually feed back to that buying group and say to them, this is what your customers think. And these people didn't like what we did, but here's the feedback. And that's gone down really, really well. So my customer now gets to see what the end user feels. And I think we live in a feeling world. If you go on Facebook, somebody asks you what they want for breakfast, and should I do this? Or actually, I've really lost my temper, so now I'm going to tell you all, I don't like working with this restaurant, or I didn't like this car garage, very, very quickly. So if you can get to customers and give them the opportunity to talk back to you, but then make sure that you talk back to them. So anybody in our organisation who gives us a 6 or below, there should be a manager on the phone within an hour and talking to that customer. Not to say, don't ever give us a score like that again, but to talk and understand. We also ring tens, and David knows this and he smiles whenever I say it. And it's not a lack of trust in my actual engineers. It's a thing where you go back to the customer and you say, well, Chris, thanks very much for giving us that 10 feedback. But why? Because if you give me a 10, loads more people give me a 10. So, if I could just repeat, what was the magic today?
What was the magic sauce?
Yeah. And it gives us that real live opportunity, and it really makes us think things differently. And I have to be truthful, it's been one of the key helps in our drive for quality. Our CX manager fell in love with it the first day she came into the business. So Gina looked at it, didn't get it the first day, then suddenly went, wait a minute, this is coming in live. I went, yeah, this is live data, you're watching it change. So really pleased.
The light bulb moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but that's not our only point of contact to our customers, but it's a great indicator, and it's actually, as I said to you, a point of sale as you pass the unit over, engineer in front of a customer. You're always going to score high, about 20 points on average. And what came out in our actual survey service to our customers, so you've got multiple questions on NPS that Gina did from our CX. We were within 4 points of what David predicted. So David said it would be about 20, and we came out high 58. So we were really pleased there.
That brings us to one lovely final question, Dave. So clearly, the ability to call that pretty darn closely means that there is some correlation between understanding the technology, understanding how the technology can allow you to leverage an understanding of your customers, and then how an organisation like Konica Minolta can then utilise that information to raise the bar further. I mean, do you want to just speak to that as a closing statement?
Yeah, sure. I think at the heart of all of the client operations that we work with, there is a fundamental operating model that exists. Our goal is to place the customer at the centre, but to recognise that the customer is one of a series of really prime entities that you need to understand within the operation, and it's really the dynamic and relationship between those actors in the operation that's critical to success. No focus on one alone will deliver the result that you're looking for, and if you truly want to deliver exceptional service, you need to exceed the expectations of the customer. To engineer to that point means that you've got to be focused on all dimensions in the operation. I think, with that, it becomes possible, if that's designed correctly, to start to understand how delivery within different operations compares. So the potential for benchmarking aspects of the process between different industry groups, etc., is an aspect of the future direction that we're seeing. Particularly collaboration actually between our customers is something that we've been really surprised at how willing, and in fact in Jed's case, how keen they have been to drive that interaction with peers, often in different industry sectors, but seeking to understand aspects of performance in their process. How does that compare? What is it that one organisation in a B2C setting might be finding out about how best to deliver service that someone in the B2B space may not have come across and can adopt?
Perfect. A great answer to finish off what's been a fantastic session. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening in. It's just for me to say thank you to our 3 guests and panelists on this session. So thank you very much. David Bohensky, CTO, Cognito IQ, Jed Cranny, Head of Direct Field Service, Konica Minolta, and Dave Webb, COO, Cognito IQ. My name is Chris Oldland. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Field Service News, and we'll see you all again soon. Take care.